My name is Mike, and this story is about the scariest night of my life. It was a Friday night, and I was home alone. My parents had gone to a business dinner and wouldn't be back until late. My sister Mia was at a friend's house. I was excited to have the house to myself. I planned to watch horror movies and eat pizza. What I didn't expect was for this night to turn into a real nightmare. It all started innocently enough. I was on the living room couch, watching a movie, when I heard a strange noise coming from upstairs. It sounded like a door opening. I froze for a few seconds, waiting to hear more, but there was nothing. I decided to ignore it, thinking it was just the house creaking. I continued watching the movie, trying not to let my imagination get the better of me. A few minutes later, I heard the same sound again. It was louder this time, and it seemed to be coming from my parents' bedroom. I slowly got up, feeling a chill run down my spine. Carefully, I climbed the stairs, trying not to make any noise. When I reached the top, I noticed that my parents' bedroom door was open. Even though I was sure I had closed it before coming downstairs, I stepped into the room, my heart pounding. Everything seemed to be in order, but the feeling that something was wrong wouldn't leave me. Suddenly, I heard footsteps coming from the guest bedroom. I spun around quickly, but saw nothing. It was as if someone was playing a game with me. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear the sound of my own heartbeat. I started to feel truly scared, but I tried to remain calm. I went back to the living room, trying to convince myself that everything was fine. I turned the television back on, but I couldn't concentrate on the movie. My gaze kept returning to the stairs, expecting to hear something else. That's when I heard a knock on the front door. I went to the door, hoping it was someone I knew. I looked through the peephole, but there was no one there. I felt a chill down my spine and quickly closed the door, locking it. My heart was racing and I didn't know what to do. I tried to calm myself, returning to the couch and turning up the volume on the TV to drown out any strange noises. Even with the TV at full volume, it seemed like the strange sounds were coming from all parts of the house. A metallic sound, like something scraping against a surface, echoed through the room. I stood up again, trying to locate the source. I decided to do a round of the house. First, I went to the kitchen. Everything seemed fine, except that the pantry door was slightly ajar. I approached it, hoping not to find anything abnormal. When I fully opened the door, there was nothing but cans and boxes of supplies. I closed the door with a sigh of relief, but the feeling of discomfort remained. Suddenly, I heard a loud noise coming from the basement. It sounded like something had fallen. I swallowed hard and grabbed a flashlight. The basement had always given me the creeps, but I needed to check. I descended the wooden stairs, which creaked with each step. The air was cold and damp, and the flashlight trembled in my hand. When I reached the bottom, I looked around, trying to find what could have caused the noise. There was a fallen box on the floor, but nothing else seemed out of place. As I made my way back to the living room, I heard a low sound, like a murmur, coming from the hallway. It sounded like a voice, but I couldn't make out the words. I stood still for a few seconds, trying to listen better. But the sound disappeared. My heart was racing, and I started to break out in a cold sweat. Something was definitely wrong, but I didn't know what to do. I returned to the living room, more scared than ever. I sat on the couch, hugging my knees, trying to think rationally. I decided I needed to call someone. I grabbed my cell phone and called my best friend, Jake. He picked up on the second ring. "Jake, can you come over? Something strange is happening," I said, trying to stay calm. "Take it easy, Mike. What's going on?" he asked, concerned. I explained everything that was happening, and he promised to come as soon as possible. Knowing that Jake was on his way gave me some relief, but the feeling that something was very wrong persisted. As I waited for Jake to arrive, the tension inside the house only increased. With each passing minute, the sounds became more disturbing. Suddenly, I heard loud banging on the front door. I ran to the door, hoping it was Jake, but when I looked through the peephole, I saw no one. My heart raced, and a chill ran through my entire body. I hesitated before opening the door, but eventually unlocked and slowly opened it. The cold night wind blew in, but there was no sign of life outside. I quickly closed the door and locked all the bolts. My anxiety grew by the second. Suddenly, I heard heavy footsteps upstairs, as if someone was running with all their might. I grabbed a baseball bat that was leaning against the corner of the room and slowly climbed the stairs. Each step seemed to echo through the empty house. When I reached the top, I saw that Mia's bedroom door was open, even though I was certain I had closed it. With the bat in my hand, I entered Maya's room. The flashlight beam trembled as I looked around. The room was empty, but I felt a strong presence, as if someone was watching me. That's when I heard a noise behind me. I spun around quickly and saw a fleeting shadow passing through the hallway. I ran into the hallway, trying to catch up with the figure, but there was no one there. I ran downstairs, my breath quick and erratic. When I returned to the living room, the lights started to flicker. Panic began to set in. I grabbed my cell phone and called Jake again. "Where are you?" "I need you here now," I said, almost shouting. "I'm 5 minutes away." "Hold on, buddy," he replied. I hung up the phone and tried to calm down, but the feeling of dread was almost unbearable. Suddenly, I heard a noise coming from the garden. I looked out the window and saw a figure standing near the fence. The figure was tall and had a strange, almost inhuman posture, and wore a hood that covered its face. I couldn't see its face as it was shrouded in darkness. My heart nearly stopped. I ran to the back door and locked all the bolts. The figure didn't move. It just watched me. I stood there, paralyzed by fear, until I heard Jake's car horn. I ran to the front door and quickly opened it, pulling Jake inside. "There's someone out there," I said, pointing to the garden. Jake looked out the window, but the figure had disappeared. Jake and I looked out the window, trying to catch a glimpse of the mysterious figure. "Are you sure you saw someone?" Jake asked, skepticism in his voice. "Yes, I swear. He was there, standing, watching me," I replied, my voice shaking. Jake looked around, but the night was quiet, with no movement. He suggested we check the garden together so that I could calm down. We grabbed flashlights and went out the back door, illuminating every corner of the garden. The cold wind rustled the trees, creating dancing shadows that added to the sense of discomfort. We walked to the fence where I had seen the figure, but there was nothing there. "Mike, maybe you imagined it. The night can play tricks on our minds," Jake said, trying to reassure me. As we turned to go back inside, I heard a sound coming from the side of the house. It was heavy breathing, as if someone was trying to hide. I looked at Jake and he nodded, understanding that we should investigate. We went to the side of the house and saw the hooded figure again. This time it was closer, almost in the shadow of the wall. My heart raced. "Who's there?" Jake shouted, but the figure didn't respond. Instead, it took a step back and disappeared into the darkness. We quickly went back inside, locking all the doors and windows. The feeling of dread was overwhelming. We decided to call the police. As we waited, the tension in the house was palpable. I sat on the couch, clutching the baseball bat tightly, while Jake stayed by the window, watching for any movement. Finally, we heard the sirens approaching, and a sense of relief began to wash over me. When the police arrived, we explained everything that had happened. They searched the garden and the perimeter of the house but found no signs of intrusion or any strange individuals. They promised to keep an eye on the neighborhood and recommended that we install security cameras. I felt a mix of relief and frustration. I knew something had happened, but I couldn't prove it. After the police left, Jake and I stayed in the living room, trying to make sense of what had occurred. "Maybe it was just someone trying to scare you," Jake suggested. But I knew it was more than that. The figure, the sounds, the feeling of being watched, it was all too real. "Thank you for coming, Jake. I don't know what I would have done without you," I said, sincerely grateful. "Don't worry, buddy. We'll figure this out," he replied, giving me a pat on the shoulder. The night passed slowly, but eventually, dawn broke. With the daylight, the house seemed less threatening, but the memories of that night would never fade. I installed security cameras and became more vigilant about the sounds around me. The hooded figure never returned, but the experience left me with a lesson. Some things, no matter how scary, cannot be explained. I never believed in supernatural stories. I was always skeptical about such things. Until that night, I was home alone, a rarity for me, as my parents decided to spend the weekend away. It was a quiet Wednesday, and I, John, was ready for a movie marathon. As the night progressed, the sounds in the house became more noticeable. Initially, I thought it was my imagination, until I heard a loud thump on the kitchen door. I got up slowly, trying to understand what could have caused that noise. I opened the door, but there was nothing, just the wind blowing gently through the windows. I returned to the living room, trying to ignore the discomfort that was starting to set in. However, it wasn't long before the noise started again, this time seeming to come from the upstairs bedroom. It sounded like something had fallen. I climbed the stairs, feeling each step creak under my feet. When I reached the hallway, I saw a picture frame on the floor, the family photo scattered across the carpet. I picked it up and put it back on the table, a chill running down my spine. I couldn't shake off the unease. The silence in the house felt heavier. I sat down on the sofa but soon heard a scratching sound at the back door. I got up again, my heart pounding. When I opened the door, The sight of the empty backyard only added to my sense of unease. I locked the door, trying to convince myself that I was safe. Then, a violent banging echoed from the basement. Every muscle in my body tensed up. I knew I should ignore it, but curiosity and fear pulled me in opposite directions, not to mention the possibility of an intruder hiding there. I walked to the basement entrance, my hands sweating as I turned the doorknob. I slowly opened the door, the darkness of the basement stretching out before me like a hungry mouth. With the basement door open, I stood still, trying to listen for any sign that would indicate the source of the banging. The darkness was absolute, and the only light available was the flashlight on my phone. I took a deep breath and started down the stairs, each step resonating like thunder in my ears. The air in the basement was freezing. My eyes struggled to adjust to the dim light as I swept the room with the faint glow of my phone's flashlight. Suddenly, the beam landed on something that made me freeze. A wooden chair was swaying slightly, as if someone had just gotten up from it. I stood paralyzed, unable to comprehend what my eyes were seeing. Before I could process it, I heard the unmistakable sound of soft footsteps upstairs. I ran out of the basement, rushing up the stairs as fast as I could. At the top, my heart nearly stopped when I saw the living room door open. I was certain I had closed it. Every inch of my skin tingled with fear. I started calling out for my sister, Sarah, in the irrational hope that she had come home early, but only silence answered me. Back in the living room, I tried to stay calm. But then, a metallic sound came from the kitchen. I stepped into the room, each step more difficult than the last. I saw several knives scattered on the floor, as if they had been thrown. My stomach churned. Something was definitely not right. As I picked up the knives, a gust of cold air passed by me, and the refrigerator door slowly opened. Inside, nothing seemed out of place, but the sight of the moving door made my heart race. I decided it was time to leave the house. I grabbed my keys and ran for the front door, but to my horror, the key wouldn't turn in the lock. It felt like something was keeping me inside, trapped in the company of my growing fear. The key getting stuck in the door sent me into a panic. I felt trapped, like a rat in a cage. I ran to the living room window and tried to open it, but the latches were rusty and wouldn't budge. My desperation only increased with each failed attempt to escape. I heard the sound of something dragging upstairs again, as if someone was moving furniture. I cautiously climbed the stairs, each step feeling endlessly long. My bedroom door was ajar, a faint light escaping through the cracks. When I pushed the door open, I saw the lamp swaying gently, casting shadows on the walls. In the middle of the room, the bed was unmade, sheets and blankets strewn on the floor. I heard a faint, low sound, as if someone was trying to speak to me, but I couldn't understand the words. My body was in shock, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I decided I needed to find a way out of the house, but before I could take a step, the closet door opened by itself with a long, ominous creak. I froze, staring into the dark interior of the closet, expecting something or someone to emerge. Only absolute silence surrounded me. With no other option, I slowly approached the closet. When I looked inside, I noticed that all my belongings were scattered, clothes and objects thrown about as if someone had searched for something. I closed the closet with a push. As I turned to leave the room, the door slammed shut, trapping me inside. I shouted for help, but my voice seemed to be swallowed by the house. I struggled with the doorknob, desperately trying to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. That's when I felt a presence behind me, a cold sensation that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I didn't dare turn around. I stood there, waiting, trying to control my breathing as the feeling of something dark and unknown intensified. The feeling of something or someone behind me was horrifying. Every second felt like an eternity. I closed my eyes and with one last effort turned the doorknob. To my surprise, the door opened. I ran into the hallway, tripping over my own feet. The sense of relief was short-lived, as the strange sounds continued, now coming from all over the house. I rushed downstairs, almost falling in the process. When I reached the ground floor, the lights started flickering in a bizarre way. The front door was still locked, but now I had a new idea. The kitchen window. I ran to it, trying to maintain my composure. To my surprise, the window opened easily. I climbed onto the windowsill, ready to jump to freedom. I stepped out, feeling the cool night air on my face. I looked back one last time, holding the keys in my hand, before walking to the neighbor's house to ask for help. Months after these events, my family sold the property, and I never told them about the strange things that happened that night. But to this day, whenever I hear a strange noise at night, I'm reminded of that house and the terrifying moments I experienced. My name is Jade, I've always loved my Saturday nights alone at home, immersed in a book or binge watching a Netflix series. On that particular night, I was on the living room couch, completely engrossed in a crime novel. The streets were quiet, and the only light in the room came from the lamp beside me. The clock struck 11:30 when I heard a strange sound coming from outside. At first, I ignored the noise, thinking it was just the wind or some nocturnal animal, but the sound persisted, as if someone was scratching the kitchen window. My curiosity got the better of me, so I slowly got up and went to the kitchen. The window was closed, and I couldn't see anything unusual outside. I returned to the living room, trying to forget the incident, but the feeling that something was lurking wouldn't leave me alone. I sat down on the sofa again and tried to focus on my book, but my mind was alert. That's when I heard a soft tap on the back door. My heart raced, and a chill ran down my spine. I grabbed my phone and called my best friend Nancy, who lived on the same street. Nancy answered after a few rings, her voice worried as I recounted what I'd heard. "Jade, lock all the doors and windows. I'm calling the police and coming over right now," she said. I hung up the phone and started checking the locks. When I reached the living room window, I saw a hooded figure standing on the sidewalk, staring intently at the house. The faint light from the street lamp illuminated only part of his face, but his eyes shone sinisterly. Terrified, I ran to my bedroom and locked the door behind me. I grabbed an old golf club that my father had left there and sat on the floor, trembling. Everything went silent again, except for the sound of my rapid breathing. I knew the man was still out there waiting for a moment of carelessness. The lights in the living room flickered from time to time, and the feeling of vulnerability enveloped me completely. Sitting on the bedroom floor, hugging the golf club, I felt like a trapped prey. Every out-of-place sound unleashed sinister thoughts in my mind. The minutes seemed to stretch into a slow torture as I waited, hoping the intruder would disappear. With each passing second, my fear grew, and the darkness outside seemed to close in even more, enveloping the house in a cold, sinister atmosphere. My thoughts ran wild, fueled by the fear that was building inside me. Who was this hooded man, and why was he so determined to get into my house? My heart pounded erratically, and cold sweat trickled down my forehead. I could no longer distinguish the normal sounds of the night from potential danger signals. Every sound, every shadow, seemed like a potential threat, turning my sanctuary into a living hell. The minutes felt like hours, and the tension in the air was palpable. I felt like I was on the edge of a precipice, about to fall into the abyss. My hands trembled as I tightly gripped the golf club, ready to defend myself at any moment. However, the silence persisted outside, as if the intruder was just waiting, watching, planning his next move. The fear consumed me, but it also fueled my determination to survive this night of terror. I couldn't let my fear paralyze me. I had to find a way to face this situation, or my own mind would succumb to the horror. Nancy arrived a few minutes later, along with a police officer she had called to investigate the incident. I explained everything that had happened, from the initial noise at the window to the endless tension of the night and the figure of the hooded man. The officer asked me a few questions but seemed skeptical of my story. However, when he examined the marks on the window and saw the genuine expression of fear on my face, his demeanor changed. He promised to increase patrols in the area and advised me to stay alert in the coming days. The hours crept by, and the darkness outside began to yield to the first rays of dawn. The night of terror was finally coming to an end, but the fear still lingered in the air throughout the house. I got up from the floor, feeling every muscle ache from the prolonged tension. Cautiously, I approached the living room window. The hooded figure had disappeared, leaving behind only the memory of his menacing presence. Taking a deep breath, I opened the window and let the sunlight flood the room. As the day progressed and normalcy began to restore itself, I knew that this night of terror would leave deep marks on my mind. The man at the window remained a mystery, but I knew I had to stay vigilant, as he was never found, and his intentions to break into my house were never discovered. If you enjoyed the video you just watched, you won't want to miss this next one. Click now and I'll see you there.